The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
It's time to go on the mat. The Cedar Valley's longest-running radio show devoted entirely to wrestling. Brought to you by Rolling Ford and the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum on 1650 The Fan.
Welcome to another edition of On the Mat right here on 1650 The Fan. I'm Scott Fensloff, the producer, and today Kyle Klingman is not with us. He had to be away today, but will be back next week. So in his place is his regular guest host. We'll introduce him now, Andy Hamilton of TrackWrestling.com.
Thanks, Scott. We're joined this week by a wrestling icon from the Cedar Valley, Chuck Yagla, longtime wrestling official, two-time NCAA champion, NCAA outstanding wrestler, Olympic team member. Lots of good stuff, Chuck. Welcome. Thanks for joining us this week.
Oh, thanks for the invite. It's great to be here and great to join in.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting about you, and it pops up on my Facebook feed, probably about every 2 weeks it seems, you're hitting another hole in one. Every time I look, how many are you up to now, and when are you going on tour?
Well, it's been a good year, or the last year was a great year for me. I'm up to 5 hole-in-ones for my career, but last year was a little unique. I had 2 in 1 year, so last year was a really good year, but I don't think I'm quite ready to go on tour.
Well, I'm sure through the years you've played a lot of golf with wrestlers. Which wrestler have you played with who's got the best game?
That's a tough question. I'd say probably the wrestler that I played with that's been the best golfer is probably Randy Lewis. He doesn't have the best swing, but he knows how to win. It's similar to his wrestling. Well,
before we went on air, we were talking off air about some of your international experiences, and we've got the Euregan this week streaming live on Track Wrestling over in Krasnoyarsk, Russia. It was 52 below over there on, I believe, Saturday, pretty close to an all-time record low in Siberia. You had the opportunity to travel a little bit internationally. Where were your favorite places to go and compete, and why?
Well, actually, internationally, I traveled twice to the former Soviet Union, to the Tbilisi tournament, which I think the Euregans kind of replaced that, if I understand it right. But those were very fun trips for me to go. I'd love to go back sometime, but going to Tbilisi, Georgia, which was down in the southern part of the Soviet Union, and those were great trips. And both times I went, we'd stop in Moscow for 3 or 4 days, and it was quite an experience just to be in Moscow, and we stayed right close to the Red Square, so just seeing the people there and being around Red Square and the Kremlin, it was a great cultural experience for me.
That tournament at the time, I mean, you've heard people talk through the years about that tournament being maybe the toughest tournament in the world, not the Olympics, not the World Championships, because you're not going up against just one Russian, you're going up against a bracket full of them. How stiff was the competition at those, and what are your most vivid recollections about your matches over there?
Well, the competition, like you said there, was very, very tough, and I agree. It was tougher than the World Olympics because, a typical bracket would have, 16 to 20 athletes, and there'd be probably 4 or 5 or 6, from non-Soviet countries or not non-communist countries, and the other 10 or 12 guys were Russian or communist, Soviet Union wrestlers that were competing against the other, Russians, and that made it very, very, very tough tournament. And it was a very grueling tournament. It was in a big arena with huge crowds, and it was just a great atmosphere. But sometimes some of the officiating, my memories go back to some of the officiating was a little bit. I'm not sure how I would describe it politely, but very biased, towards the Russians. But you expected that, and you just had to get through that and be above that.
I've heard some international horror stories about travel, whether it be lost baggage or just the adversity that wrestlers have to deal with going overseas. And I think back to a story Mike Zadek told me one time about being in an arena where it was almost like 40 degrees and not being able to get a sweat going. What kind of challenges did you run into, competing overseas?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. That was one of the biggest challenges for me competing overseas because, back then I cut a lot of weight to get down to 68 kilograms. And if I wrestled that weight, sometimes I'd go up a weight, going overseas. But trying to go overseas and competing, you never had the luxuries you had, back home. Like, if I had to cut weight in Iowa City, I'd go up to the wrestling room and it'd be 85, 90 degrees, and you could easily break a sweat. Overseas, none of the places did that. You were lucky if it was, a room temperature of 72 degrees. Usually it was colder than that. So those were the biggest challenges, trying to get the proper nutrition and cut weight at the same time. It was very, very difficult, back in those days.
We're coming up on the 20-year anniversary of the dual meet that, in my opinion, is the best dual meet that I've seen in the last, in the last 20 years, college wrestling. Iowa, Oklahoma State, 1998, Carver Hawkeye Arena. You're in the middle of it all. What are the things that stick out in your memory about that? Is there a call? Is there a moment in that dual meet that really pops to your mind when people bring up that dual meet?
Yeah, that dual meet, that was probably, the most exciting and probably the funnest meet that I ever officiated, as a college official. And the thing that sticks out the most to me in that meet was early on in the second match of the night, there was a young Doug Schwab wrestling Eric Guerrero, who at the time, I think Guerrero was coming off a shoulder injury, but nobody knew that. So Doug Schwab, was his typical go, and was just pushing the pace, and Guerrero, was getting tired. Schwab got behind early. You can see the comeback coming though, but I don't think anybody thought he would beat Guerrero, but it got sold out in Carver Hawkeye Arena. My memory is, that's the loudest I've ever heard it during that match ever when I've been in Carver Hawkeye Arena for any sporting event. And I warned Eric Guerrero for stalling, and normally you don't. They were both on their feet, and you would not stop the match. But I stopped the match purposely because I didn't think Guerrero knew I warned him for stalling because it was so loud. That was my biggest memory from that meet, just how loud it was. And there were lots and lots of great matches and a lot of calls, but that particular match sticks out the most in my mind.
Yeah, a lot of wild stuff happened in that dual meet. You had Ironside getting a pin, and then Steve Schmidt turning around, and McGinnis had a cradle locked up, and he tried a suicide cradle, and Steve Schmidt caught him on his back, and so bang, bang, right? Back and forth, 2 pins back and forth, and the momentum shifting like crazy early on. There were some really good scraps after that. There was a disqualification in there, right? I mean, right. was it at 190 at the time with Fullhart and Papalizio? Is that?
Yep. Yeah, 190. Fullhart was, he was a former national champion, and he's wrestling. I assume it was a young Papalizio. I'm not sure what grade he was, but Fullhart was, taking it to him, and and I thought, Papalizio was, stalling, so. I actually ended up disqualifying him. Of course, Coach Smith was not very happy with that call because that at the time that put Iowa back into the meet. If it would have been a regular decision, it would have been out of reach with the heavyweights coming up. But that gave the Hawkeyes a chance to win the meet. And I didn't have any problems making the call. And people, I think, with me being a former Hawkeye, but I don't think I was ever biased towards the Hawkeyes one way or the other. I think that's my integrity. I just refereed how I refereed, and that was a tough call to make, but I think it was the right call. And I actually, it came down to heavyweight, and Oklahoma State, heavyweight won in overtime, and Oklahoma State won the meet. So, it didn't really affect the outcome of the meet, but I would have had not a problem either way if it would have.
How difficult is it as an official not to let the crowd or coaches influence you?
Oh, as an official, you try to block that all out. But sometimes, you obviously you hear the noise, but you try to block it out. It's difficult. I can't say it's not difficult to not let that affect you, but you can't. You just got to go and do your job and watch what's in front of you, and not pay attention to the coaches, not pay attention to the fans, and just watch the two wrestlers and award the points as you see them, and go from there. Is it easier to officiate now or 20 years ago, you think? Boy, that's a tough question. I don't know if you could compare it. For me, it's hard to compare. I think sometimes now they're complicating the rules more than they need to. But, that's just my personal opinion. And I'm not a fan of the video review. I think it's not good for wrestling. Other sports, I'm okay with it. But in wrestling, when conditioning is a big factor and momentum is a big factor, and you stop in the middle of a match, to review a call that sometimes takes 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, I just don't like that. So that part I don't like, but it's probably overall you're probably getting the right calls more often, but I still not a fan of it.
Do you like it better now with a second official looking at the review?
Yes, that change I like with it. When you have the official making the call, reviewing his own call, I mean that's just not not something I think that's going to be very valid most of the time. But when you have a separate official that's independent of the official on the mat, has nothing to do with the match, just sitting there and watching and reviewing that call, I think is way better. And I hope that's the direction they go. I think it's a pilot project this year to do that. And it's mostly in the Big Ten Conference. I think are the only ones that are doing that. And I hope that sticks. But I don't know where it's going to go or how it's been accepted. By the coaches and the powers to be.
How about some of this other stuff? The scramble rules, the out of bounds rules. What are your thoughts on those?
I think I like the changes I've seen in those. The out of bounds, I like. All you have to have is a toe in. I like that because too many things would happen when a guy gets out of bounds and you have to stop it. And I like the new rule on the danger zone when they get past 90 degrees. I think that's a great change because over the years as people started those scramble situations, I think so many times the guy would dive through the legs and grab a guy's leg and just hang on just to create a stalemate. And that I don't think that was good for the sport because too many times that just stopped the match and they start over again. Well, now if the guy is on his back, for 3 seconds, they're going to give the takedown, which I think that's a great rule change, and I think it's already changed this year the way guys wrestle because you don't see that situation as much as you used to.
What about the action rule on the edge? Whether it's the offensive wrestler who's warned for pushing him out and stalling that way, whether it's the guy backing out that's stalling, or whether it's action. What seems like there's a lot of gray area there. Yeah,
there is a lot of gray area. I think if it's called right, I like it, but there's a little bit of subjectivity there if a guy's pushing the guy out or if the guy is actually backing out. But I do like the fact that they're trying to keep him on the mat and trying to keep him in the center and not on the edge. It was so easy for guys to get on the edge and then bail out of a situation because they knew they're on the edge. Well, this rule, the intent of it, I think is great. If they can get a little better on consistency of officials all over the country calling it the same, then the wrestlers will adapt. But I think it's a great rule. I go back in the, I don't know if it was the 40s or the 50s, people said the Olympic team for freestyle and wrestling was they were going over to the London Olympics and they took a boat over, aircraft carrier or whatever it was, and they actually had tryouts on the mat on the ship where if they went out of bounds, they fell off the ship. Well, those guys never fell out. Those guys never went out of bounds. They said no one ever went out of bounds.
But what about a push-out rule? If we went straight to a push-out rule, would that be better? Would that be worse? What are your thoughts on that?
I like the push-out rule in freestyle, the way it's handled. I'm not sure it's so good for college, and I'm not sure in my mind why the difference. But I think it might be good for college, the push-out rule, because it definitely keeps guys away from the edge of the mat. So, but it's another thing that needs to be analyzed, I guess, and I'm on the fence on that, whether it'd be good for college wrestling or not.
To me, the most inconsistent call in sports right now is stalling in wrestling. And it would be like if one umpire in baseball called the strike zone from the feet up to the waist and another one called it from the waist up to the bill of the cap and so on and so forth. What did you look for when you called stalling? What were things that triggered the fist going up in the air for you?
For me, I refereeing a match and watching a match, it would just be, who's trying to score, who's trying to create action, who's trying to score in this match versus, who's not trying to score. So, that's what triggered it most of the time for me. And when you're officiating, you get a feel for, who's trying to create the action and who's trying to score. It doesn't mean they have to be offensive. A lot of guys score a lot from defense, but just who's trying to put points on the board. And if they're not trying to put points on the board, and somebody's stalling.
You had a pretty interesting career as a competitor too, and you never won a state title. Placed second as a senior at Waterloo Columbus. You go to Iowa, you win a couple NCAA titles. You mentioned the OW at the NCAAs. You make an Olympic team. What do you think the Iowa staff saw in you in high school, and what happened in Iowa City that led you to reach another level? Why did your career take off?
Oh, I think at the time, Coach Kurlmeyer, he's the one that basically recruited me. And I think he just saw that I was competitive and, and a hard worker. And, of course, that was going to be Coach Gable's first year as assistant coach. So I knew he was going there. He wasn't actually involved in recruiting me. But the thing that made the big difference to me, and I tell this, is Coach Gable. People say, well, what made the difference? I say, well, 2 words, Dan Gable. I mean, just being around him and seeing how hard he worked, and the work ethic and the training, that just made a huge impact on me, and I never realized how much you could actually put into it. I mean, nobody worked out as hard as he did back in those days, but for me, going there and being around him every day in the practice room and seeing how he was still in better shape than anybody on our team, and he's retired. So just his effect on me and his effect on the rest of the athletes, and buying into that work ethic and the training and how you can everything you do and the proper nutrition and just all those different things put together, I think is what made the big difference for me.
Was there one moment in there when things really seemed like they clicked for you? Was there a match in there that kind of got you over the hump?
I can't go back to a specific match. I know, my sophomore year is when it really started to click. I mean, I started as a freshman and had an okay season, but, at that time I still wasn't, anywhere near working out, anywhere near the conditioning, the shape that I would eventually figure out, in the ensuing years. But my sophomore year, early in that year, I can't place an exact time on it, but I had a string of 6 or 7 matches in a row that I pinned my opponents. And I think at that point something clicked, and I realized, I could be good at this, and I just got to keep training harder. And then from then on, it just got better, and things obviously culminated in having a very successful college career.
When did you guys know something incredibly special was going on in Iowa City?
Boy, I don't know when we ever figured that out. I don't think at the time we ever realized what was happening. I mean, obviously it became a great dynasty, but my junior year was the first year we won nationals. They're out in Princeton in 1975, and we had 2 national champs, myself and Dan Holm, and that was a very special moment. Winning that first national title as a team, that was huge. But I don't know that we had any idea what we were a part of at the time. Obviously looking back now, it was great. And, the first Big Ten title we won was my sophomore year in 1974. And then they won 25 consecutive Big Ten conference team titles after that. And we had no idea, I don't think at the time, of what was going to become and what we had started.
We got to go to break soon, but I want to ask you one thing. You didn't get a chance to go to Moscow for the 80 Olympics because of the American boycott. How did you deal with that?
Oh, it's just one of those things that you try to get over. I'm probably more bitter now than I was, back at the time. I think I might have accomplished something, the boycott, but obviously it didn't. So it's just something I deal with. But I tell people I still, the most I could have got as a wrestler was 1 gold medal, and I got 2 gold medals. Congress gave us 1, and USOC gave us 1.
We'll be back with more on the mat in just a moment. We'll have, as our first guest, Missouri head wrestling coach Brian Smith.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When all you want is sports, all you need is 1650 The Fan.
We're back on the mat right here on 1650 The Fan. Scott Fensloff along with special guest host today, Andy Hamilton of TrackWrestling.com.
Well, we're joined in our second segment by Missouri coach Brian Smith. Welcome in, Coach.
How you doing, Andy?
Doing great. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, Missouri, you guys have a big duel coming up Saturday night in Stillwater against Oklahoma State, and you're coming up this way for a February 17th duel at Northern Iowa. Such a good rivalry there between the Panthers and the Tigers when both schools were in the MAC. What led you to keeping Northern Iowa on your schedule after they left the MAC?
Good wrestling. It doesn't matter what conference you're in. When we were leaving the Big 12, John and I got together and said, let's keep wrestling. It's good dual meets. We got to keep scrapping. And same thing with Doug and I. When Doug said he's leaving, he's like, will you still wrestle us? I said, of course. It's good matches. And we've had some great dual meets over the years that it's good for the fans. We're also only 4.5, 5 hours apart. So logistically, it makes sense. that we can travel up and wrestle, and so it's a good thing, and it's great matches, and that's what people want to see, and it's good for our team. The matchups with the rankings for seeding and things like that, the kids need that.
To me, one of the most impressive things about your program, if you pay attention to recruiting class rankings, Missouri is never at the top in recruiting class rankings, but year after year, you continue to find and develop these guys who aren't coming to Columbia with truckloads of Fargo titles, and they turn out to be really, really good college wrestlers. You know, I'm thinking about guys like Drake Howdy-Shelton, Joey LaValle, Levon Mays, John Ernesty, Daniel Lewis, Jaden Ironman. I could go on, but even, further back than, Nick Marable and Matt Pell and maybe Ben Askren. Now, some of those guys came in with more credentials than others, but to my recollection, none were can't-miss top 10 pound-for-pound recruits. So what's happening here? Do you feel like your staff's got elite evaluation skills? Is this more of a developmental thing? What kind of things go into that?
It's definitely a belief in a system. So we have a system of Tiger style, how we're going to take these, it's a philosophy of a program, but it's also what we do with kids. It's about 10 and a half months of the year. It's really every day, but when they come in as freshmen, they're here for summer school for 8 weeks, and there's certain things we're putting them through with, testing their conditioning, evaluating injuries from the past and getting them stronger in those situations. The drills they're doing with upperclassmen and learning things and getting better technically. It's just a whole process, besides the fact that they're going to classes and adjusting on how you go to class and how you use the tutor system. So it's the whole lifestyle of it. And we do feel like we do a great job developing kids. We have a lot of individual practices with guys. We have team practices, but there's a lot of individual. I'm actually in the room right now watching. There's only 6 wrestlers in it, but there's 3 coaches, and they're working with each of the groups and working on specific things with those guys on the areas that they are strong at and that they also need to improve at. And as you do that through 10 and a half months, you become better, and you get better, and your confidence grows. And we have, when you look at the end of the year, our guys are confident, and we're putting All-Americans on the podium and getting some national champs.
What do you look for in a recruit that you think is unique? What makes a high school prospect a good fit for Tiger style and what you guys are all about?
Well, one of it is, we're looking for kids that are goers. We want kids that are goers. We like, that have a gas tank. That's an important thing because that doesn't change. If they don't have a gas tank in high school, you're not going to create one later on usually. So you want a gas tank. I saw that in Drake Howdy-Shelton. I was like, this kid just goes. He may not be a high-ranked kid, but he wins and he goes hard. He's going to be a good college wrestler, that type of thing. But also then we look for good, we're not afraid to go after, a kid with a different style that wrestles hard, like a Ben Askren or a Jaden Ironman. So it's that. We also look for kids that want to be a part of Tiger style. When we're talking to kids and immediately they say, man, I love what this culture is about and the whole Tiger style thing. I've been reading about it, what you've been sending me. I really like that. And they're bought into it. And we know they're going to, right away, they're going to be committed to it. And the other part is we're looking for intelligent kids. If you look at my kid, my team, we've had a lot of academic All-Americans and a lot of engineering students and really bright kids like Daniel Lewis and Levon Mays. They're both engineering, and John Ernesty got his degree in 3.5 years and could have went to Princeton. It was between us and Princeton, but they're very bright and coachable kids. And so it's with that, we know we're not getting maybe the number one guy. Cox was like a number one guy, but if you look at, they're not all number one guys, but if I can get kids that want to commit and get better and better every day, and they're talented and they fit the process, we're going to have successful teams, and that's kind of what's carried us there, that believing in that process. And then you steal a few good ones here and there, and you get them, and you put a good team together, and we've been fortunate to do that.
A lot of those guys that we've named are in-state guys for you guys.
Yes.
Is Missouri high school wrestling underrated?
Yes, don't recruit it. Nobody should recruit it. How's that for an answer?
That's great.
You know what? I make my living off of Missouri kids. I'm looking up at our national champion wall, and it's Drake Howdy-Shelton, Jaden Cox, and Mark Ellis. 3 of the 5 kids that are on that wall besides the Askrens are from the state of Missouri. I look at the All-American board, and there's a lot of Missouri kids on there. So I have to win with Missouri kids. If I can keep most of the best Missouri kids home, we're going to win. We're going to win. So I understand that. We work hard with our regional training center that we're working on. We have the schoolboys training out of here. Now we're working on getting the cadets and juniors training out of here. So it's a good thing that we're going to get all the Missouri kids coming through our room and training here and working around our staff, or, having the practices here, so they'll be around us. So it's important to us that we keep the best, because there's good kids. There's really good kids in Missouri. And they should want now. When I first got to Missouri, nobody wanted to come. Now they've grown up. We've been good for 17, 18 years, or I think 17 years now, that they don't know Missouri as a team from when I first got here. They know us as being very competitive and winning, team trophies and conference titles and national titles. So they see this is a program that we can go to, and the facilities we have are unbelievable. So I don't know if you've ever been up here, but we have some of the nicest facilities in the country, with a 4,000 square foot weight room designated just for wrestling. We have a gigantic wrestling room, and then we have a regional training center that has 2 full mats. So training facility-wise, with all the cardio and all the other stuff, it's amazing. It's just the school has really gone way above and helped us and made it into a top-notch facility.
In my 20 years or so covering the sport, I can't think of one guy who has helped change the face of a program more than Ben Askren did at Missouri. It just seems like before and after, it became a different program. When did you know you had something special there?
When I talked to him. When I first started talking to him, he was ranked like 6th or 7th at his weight. And I just remember, this kid's kind of special. And then I saw his film, and I just saw what he was doing on film, and I was like, this kid just wrestles in every position, that he's a nightmare to wrestle. And then talking to him and seeing how some people would think it was arrogant or conceited, I just said, man, this kid is so confident he's going to be really good. And so this was in his junior, I think it was right in the summer when we could first start calling in July, and then he went to the junior nationals, and he goes out and beat the kid from Lehigh that won the national title. I'm drawing a blank, but
Troy Letters, maybe?
Troy Letters. He beat Letters, who was a senior, and he was already going to Lehigh, and Ben was going into his senior year. And I was like, oh, man, we're probably going to lose him. But he was just so confident. When I was calling him and talking with him, he would always talk about Muhammad Ali, how he's his idol and this and that. So knowing that's his personality, and then you find out from his coaches and club guys and all, this kid is just a special kid. And plus, he was like a 3/8 student. So that really intrigued me, that he's just this bright and doing everything right and living his life, but also loves to wrestle. He always had the mat in the basement. And when he moved down here, first thing he did was put another wrestling room in his house that he's living in. And so it's just, he's so committed to the sport and loved it, loves to practice. So you have something special there.
I think another guy that's really interesting is on your roster now, Joey LaValle, and his career has taken such a unique path. I mean, I think 54-24 his first 2 seasons. He redshirts, and if memory serves me correct, you were at a point during that redshirt year where you were ready to let him go. What happened? What changed with him, and what put him on the path where he's only lost 3 matches in the 2 seasons since?
He just decided to do it right. He was just kind of down, and a redshirt year can do that, and that's the scary thing of it, but he just wasn't happy and just wasn't doing it right, and going through the motions, and everything just wasn't right. He just didn't want to be here, it seemed like. So I just said, you need to leave. I think you need to leave. And he's like, no, I don't want. And I said, well, then what can you do different? And we went through a list and made the list. And, of course, he said all these things. I'm going to cut my hair. I'm going to start doing this. I promise you, Coach, I need to change. You're right. And he just needed to bring it out. And he knew it, but he was in the rut and just let it continue. And that happens with people sometimes. They just sometimes need somebody to recognize that, hey, you're not doing it right. And the next day he showed up with a haircut, started training hard, and it just, boom. Next thing you know, it's like 6 or 7 months later, and he's in the national finals. And now he's tearing people up and doing such a great job. So we're pleased with that. It's not every kid will always do that, but you have to challenge. That's part of coaching, that the side that people don't always see, that you have to challenge a kid and show them that, hey, you're a little off the path right now. If you get on that path, special things can happen if you'll do it. And you hope they'll do it. So.
As we mentioned at the top, you guys have a big one coming up Saturday night in Stillwater. Some really pivotal matches up and down the bout card there. 133 with John Ernesti against Cade Brock. 141, Jaden Eierman against two-time NCAA champ Dean Heil. 197, Willie Miklas against Preston Weigel. Let's start with 141. What does Jaden Eierman have to do to get over the hump against Dean Heil?
just keep doing what he's doing. He's, when you look at him last year compared to this year, last year he didn't really have leg attack. He would find ways to score on guys through a scramble and that. But now you look at the leg attacks he's hitting, from little ducks to pass-bys to singles to doubles. He has way into a little throw-by. And he's got a lot of things to score on his feet. And last year he wasn't getting that. Last year I told him, I said, you waited till the Nationals to pull out a single. He ended up taking fifth. I said, this year you have a lot of stuff, and it's made a big difference. And that's why, he has the ability to get on top more, because he's good on top. So that's a big difference. He has the ability to score more points from his offensive attacks, which is good. So if he just goes out and does that and gets some leg attacks and scores, he can win the match. So which we know he can.
Willie Miklas is one of my favorite characters that I've ever covered in Iowa high school wrestling. 4-time state finalist, 2-time state champ. What's it been like to coach him?
He's just a great kid. There's kids you really enjoy their personality, and he's a happy kid. He just enjoys being here. It's just awesome to have a kid like that in your program. And what he's had to go through, too, with the adversity. He's had a lot of adversity with injuries. First year, he blows his shoulder out during his redshirt year, so that's frustrating. And, his freshman year, I think he was unseeded in places. And then last year, he was like 2 years ago, he was like the 14th seed and makes the NCAA semifinals. So, he's just when the lights go on type of guy, he's going to wrestle. And that's just him. He enjoys wrestling, and he loves it. So he knows he's always in a match. He's always in a match, and we saw that this year. We were losing a match to Haught and found a way to pin him and help us win a dual meet. So that's the type of kid he is. He just has fun with it, enjoys life, and the great thing is just having a kid like that in your program that permeates through the room and helps the room become better.
You talk about adversity, and I don't know of too many in college wrestling that have overcome more than Grant Leaf. Such an incredible story this year. He wears the neck wrap.
Yep.
I think he's up to maybe third or fourth in the rankings now. A Missouri kid who went to Duke and then came back home. How hard did you recruit him in the beginning, and how did this situation play out where you got him back?
Well, we recruited him, but then he committed early to Duke. So we figured, we lost him. It's a great academic school, and we can understand it. And then after a year, he asked for he put in for a release, and we got the thing, and we're like, let's call this kid. He's tough. But he had an injury that year, and then he gets here, and he has to he blows his knee out, and then so he's out for a season. Then the next year he has to have neck surgery, so he's out for a third straight season. And so it was just really tough. I remember sitting down with his family and saying, this is it. He's probably got a medical, and we need to just think that he's not going to come back. And he's like, I got to give it one more try, Coach. I got it. I'm like, okay. We're going to be, but you're going to have to do it my way. We're not going to practice every day. We're going to be smart about it. You're wearing a neck brace every day. And so, of course, here we are, it's probably a year later, and the kid's doing amazing. And he's ranked third in the country, I think, right now. And I think he's had 4 or 5 top 10 wins, but just, he's enjoying it too. And he's listening, and he's a part of the team. He just loves that he can be a part of the team and help us win duels. And so he's enjoying it. And that's an important thing too, that his teammates are really helpful with him. But he's just a great kid. He's another kid that, with that academic side too, he's really smart and does a great job. You never have to worry about him off the mat. So, but what he's doing on the mat is something special this year. We just got to keep him rolling.
Not a lot of people are talking about what Daniel Lewis is doing, at least on the national level. But, man, he is lighting people up this year, undefeated, a lot of pins, techs, I think pretty much bonus for the most part this season. How much is that just moving up from 65 to 174, or is there a lot more to that story that we don't know?
No, I think it is the moving up. Last year cutting the weight, his practice habits weren't as good. This year, he is just practicing much harder. He's lifting harder. And so his training in the room, but there's also his commitment to wrestling on his feet. Last year it would just be, I think one time at the Nationals, he got a takedown and rode the kid and somehow ended up riding the kid for 6 minutes and 50 seconds at Nationals. I was like, Daniel, but you just barely got a major. You should be tech falling guys like that. Cut them out and break them a little. And so this year, that's all he's been doing more of, getting 2 and 3 takedowns in the first period and working on it because he knows he's got to win matches sometimes on his feet. They can't always rely on just one area. He's got to be efficient in all three areas. So he's been really working at that. So pleased with him. He's doing a great job.
Well, Brian, we got a co-host with me today, Chuck Yagla, and he's got a question for you.
Okay. How you doing, Chuck?
Good. I'm doing real good. Hey, I'm getting fired up just listening to you. Your program is growing great, and I just have a question about your schedule this year. I noticed you didn't go to Midlands or the Scuffle or Cliff Keene, and maybe you've addressed this before, but was that a conscious decision, and that South Beach Duels thing, that sounded inviting to me. I'd love to go down there. Wish I was still official. You could invite me down there to work with you. But what was your thought process with this season?
Well, we were doing that South Beach Duel, so we couldn't do the Scuffle or the Midland. But, the thing about it is all of my guys got 4 matches. All my starters got 4 matches there. And, people would say, yeah, but you didn't get the 5 or 6. But we got 4. We got 2 each day. And we didn't have to spend our time in the gym the entire day. It was within 4. We were in there for 5 hours and out. And a lot of my guys had highly ranked guys. Ryder had a bunch of ranked guys, and then the other match was Kent State, which was a conference duel. So, and then we stayed and trained, and it was an amazing experience for my team because they were living in a house together. We were doing talks, and, living together and doing things, but also in the warm weather. So it was really for a team-wise and bonding and things, those things are just as important as the training, and we did some great training down there. So it was a way to break up the winter break. And we went to the Lindenwood Open, which had a lot of full teams there. Iowa State brought their whole team. West Virginia had it. There were a bunch of teams there, so we got to see them. And we've had some tough duels. We have Illinois on the schedule, Northern Iowa on the schedule. You look at Cornell. We've had some good matches, so I don't think it's the tournaments are important, but I look at these young men today, and they've wrestled so many national tournaments now growing up that I don't think they're awed by national tournaments. From when I grew up, there was a junior national tournament. That was it when you were a kid. These kids wrestle national tournaments their whole lives, and tournaments all the time, that they know how to wrestle in tournaments, the kids we're recruiting.
Well, thanks so much for joining us this week, Brian. Greatly appreciate it, and best of luck to you guys the rest of the way.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll be back with more On the Mat after this on 1650 The Fan.
Log on and listen online at 1650thefan.com, the online home of 1650 The Fan.
We're back on the mat right here on 1650 The Fan, and once again, here's Andy Hamilton of TrackWrestling.com.
We are joined in our third and final segment, rejoined by Duke All-American heavyweight Jacob Kasper. We tried it once, had some technical difficulties, got him back. Welcome back, Jacob. Thank you for taking the time to rejoin us.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we had a chance to talk to you back in the fall for our 7-minute series on track wrestling, and we've added some questions since then. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation back then, but we've added a couple new questions, and I kind of want to kick this thing off with your response to those questions. And one of the things that's been really interesting for me to ask some guys here in the last couple months is this question. If you could go back and have a conversation with yourself at 15, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, first off, thanks for saying the nice words about our conversation previously. I enjoyed it as well. If I was to go back and give advice to myself at age 15, I probably would just tell myself, stay true to who you are. Stay true to what you know is right and continue to do those things. And if you do those things, you'll find success. A lot of people get caught up in going to college and, trying to become someone new, or because they're surrounded in a new environment, trying to pretend to be something they're not. And it hasn't gotten you to the point of getting ready to go to college, and it won't help you at all once you get to college. So, I know you're just 15 right now or whatever, but stay true to who you are and what you know is right, and just always work hard and keep those values and morals close to you.
How'd you wind up at Duke?
It's kind of a funny story. I had sat down with my parents, and we made the decision that I wanted to wrestle in college. And if I was going to do it and really buy into it, I wanted to do it at the highest level possible. And that meant Division I for myself. So we kind of sat back, and after I found success, waited for some Division I calls, and I really didn't get any. Fortunately, I had some high school teammates that were already at Duke. So we knew the coaches here, and they were the only ones really to reach out. It worked out for the best way, though, because, I wanted somebody that wanted me, and they wanted me down here. They told me from day one that they believed I could be a national champion here, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to try to do it at the highest level possible. So although they were the only ones to recruit me, I think it worked out in the best possible way. So Duke was really the only option I ever had, to be honest.
What do you think they saw in you that other people didn't?
I think they just got to interact with me a little bit more, and I got to see the passion and the heart that I had. I think that I wouldn't be successful or be who I am without those characteristics. And unless you had a little bit more of a long-standing relationship and got to interact with me on a personal level and maybe in person, you wouldn't have got to see some of those characteristics come through. I think text is often difficult to read. And, a lot of the other schools that I had wanted to go to, I had emailed or just called and left a voicemail. And I don't think those coaches got a fair opportunity to see what kind of passion and heart I brought to the table.
I think your story, your program story is pretty interesting to me, and I wrote a little bit about it last year for one of our ACC notebooks. You guys don't have scholarships, and you're operating, what some people would call a shoestring budget compared to other Division I programs, high-level Division I programs, and some challenges go into that. What is it like being a Duke wrestler? What are some of the challenges you have to deal with that maybe other programs don't, guys at other programs don't, and what have you learned to appreciate about wrestling at Duke?
That's a great question. I think a lot of the guys that are coming into Duke kind of have a chip on their shoulder for those reasons, and that gives us a little bit of a competitive edge. But, yeah, it's difficult. We don't have scholarships, so sometimes we don't get guys that are as serious about it coming in. I think they kind of think it's going to be more of a extracurricular activity rather than a full-time job, and we take things very serious down here despite having a small budget. It's difficult, you get to witness some of the gear constraints or some of the travel constraints where other teams go to tournaments a couple days early and get it fully acclimated, or maybe they bring their sports psychologist or massage therapist or chiropractor or nutritionist, whatever it may be, and we're not fortunate enough to have those things. But, at the end of the day, we're kind of old school here. We're all right with what we got. You get us some weights, you get us a mat, and it doesn't really matter where it's at. You throw it down. We're going to work hard and scrap and do everything we possibly can to get better. And that's just kind of the experience I've had at Duke. As far as other challenges, Duke presents a great deal of problems academically as well. It's an academically rigorous and prestigious university, so that often presents problems for guys. So a lot of those times when other schools are at tournaments to get acclimated, we wouldn't even be able to do that anyway because we have to be in class. It's not really possible to miss class and still be strong student athletes at this school.
So you have, if I'm not mistaken, memory serves me correct, you have a lot of guys that are out getting internships and jobs and things like that in the summer because of, the cost of tuition and the lack of scholarships and things like that, right? I mean, how many guys are actually sticking around in training throughout the summer there?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first came in, we didn't have any guys really stick around and train, and that was kind of a 180 from my high school situation. I was fortunate to be at a really passionate high school where we had a bunch of guys stay in and constantly go into the room and wrestle all the time. And I've sort of seen a shift. We have more and more guys sticking around Durham. They're all still getting internships and summer jobs because, like you previously mentioned, we don't have scholarships. So we have to find funding and ways to survive through the summer. But those guys now, we're trying to do those internships and jobs more central to Durham so that they're able to get in the room and work with the coaches and train full-time in the summer. So, we definitely, Coach Lanham preaches about being the total student athlete. We're definitely pursuing jobs and internships full-time, even in the summer. But now we've seen a shift in locality to closer to Durham so that we can be a total student athlete and just not the total student or total professional.
How has the perception of Duke wrestling changed during your time there?
I think that's probably more of a question for you guys to answer. In terms of culture, how it's shifted here, there's been a great culture change. Like I said, when I first came in, there were guys that probably wanted to win here, but you've seen a shift to guys willing to work to win here. And now we've got a group of guys that are young and hungry, and they're expecting to win. And that's a big shift. When you have the mentality of wanting something to being able to work for it to expecting it, it's a real change in mindset. And the actions really reflect that. We have guys getting more individuals than ever, more guys sticking around in the summer than ever, more guys getting extra workouts in, cutting weight the right way, seeking additional resources, whether it be a chiropractor or a sports psychologist or talking to the school nutritionist, whatever it may be. We have guys that are just more serious about it top to bottom. And it's been a great opportunity and great experience getting to be part of that culture change for sure.
From a student athlete standpoint, I know, your time is running out there. But do you think that there's hope for scholarships with Duke wrestling in the future? And what, from what you know of it, what might it take?
That's a great question. It's definitely something that's frustrating, but at the same time is on the forefront of my mind daily. We're in a fortunate situation at Duke to have a small campus and a small student body. And in doing so, it's a pretty intimate environment. I regularly have conversations with both the assistant athletic director and the athletic director, John Jackson and Kevin White. We've had that conversation a couple times because, to be completely honest with you, Andy, I'm a little bit frustrated at times. I feel that I have represented this university to the best of my possible ability. I've been a great student. I've gotten really good grades. I've pursued rigorous coursework. I've done extracurricular activities, whether it be fundraising, going to soup kitchens, pursuing, wrestling with Daniel Cormier in the summer to get the school added publicity. And then on top of it, I've been ranked as high as top 3 at heavyweight. And if there was any other sport, I'd be almost a guaranteed millionaire next year. But it's not the case at Duke. And in fact, I'm coming out with a lot of debt because we're not in a scholarship situation. So we've talked about it, and it's definitely a struggle. It doesn't seem like, just to be completely honest, that we're in any place to get scholarships anytime soon. So that's definitely an unfortunate thing. But, I'm hoping that with more maybe community backing, it's definitely a possible thing in the future moving forward.
Well, you talk about your coursework and the rigorous class load that you have. What are you majoring in? What do you see yourself doing in the future?
As far as what I see myself doing in the future, I'm not entirely sure. I'm majoring in sociology and evolutionary anthropology with a formal concentration in behavior, ecology, and cognition, and then a minor in African and African American studies. I just like pursuing things that I'm not necessarily familiar with and things that challenge me to grow as a person and as an individual. That's a big kind of motto I like to live by in life, and then also surrounding myself with good people. And because of that, and because of pursuing some pre-health requisites, I've got a lot of avenues open. Fortunately, with my time out with Daniel Cormier, I have the fighting option. I also have options to pursue some entrepreneurial ideas and some startups. The WWE has contacted me. I have some, competitive desires still left in me. And then long term, I definitely like to coach. So there's a lot of things on the plate, but I think I've got to prioritize and kind of look at what's time sensitive. And I would say that's still competing, especially with the 2020 games and 2024 games fast approaching, and then probably graduate school. I don't want to finish my time as a student with just a bachelor's degree. I'd like to pursue it to, at the very least, a master's, but more likely all the way through a doctorate.
Is the WWE a real possibility in your mind?
Yeah, I don't want to live my life with any regrets. I don't want to look back and wonder what could have been. So I would definitely say it's towards the top of the list. At the end of the day, I guess money talks, and it also creates a platform that I would be able to further broadcast, kind of my ideas and maybe grow the sport of amateur wrestling and just kind of impact more people. And like I said, that's one of the things that I'm pretty passionate about. So I would definitely say it's at the top of the list. I hope we can sit down with Vince McMahon and Jerry Briscoe and figure something out soon.
Your story is so interesting, and you deal with Crohn's disease, and certainly, diet and nutrition is a huge part of any wrestler's life. What are some of the challenges that presents, and how have you been able to overcome that?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging at times. It's not something that I would wish upon anybody, but I think everybody kind of has their own problems. And, own difficulties in life, so I don't necessarily like to harp or dwell on it too long. As far as from a competitive standpoint, some of the things that I have to look at is, especially being a heavyweight, I've got to maintain the weight. I'm not necessarily a big heavyweight, so I'm constantly looking at ways to, get more calories in, get more food, and keep my size, which really creates difficulties and problems when we're traveling as a team because I'm not able to stick to my diet schedule. I tend to eat every 2 to 3 hours right now, and when we're traveling as a team and a lot of the guys are cutting weight, the coaches don't necessarily stop a lot, whether we be on a plane or taking a bus or in the van. So I usually have to pack my food for that. And then overnight at competitions, I have to make sure I can find a restaurant that I tolerate pretty well, that cooks with familiar ingredients, and just try to order some more of the bland staple things of a diet so that I don't upset my stomach and risk possibly another flare-up, which could ultimately be the end of my career. I mean, I've had 3 serious flare-ups in the last 4 years, and that's not something I want to have occur again.
One of the things that probably put you on the a couple of things probably really put you on the radar as far as college wrestling goes last year. Obviously, the Southern Scuffle was a huge tournament for you to run the table there, but also poking the bear a little bit with Kyle Snyder. You called him out a little bit. You weren't afraid to put it out there. What went into that?
Like I said, I just like to challenge myself to be the best possible person I can be in all aspects of life. And as far as being an athlete is concerned, there's no better possible test or no better way to push yourself than to compare yourself against one of the all-time greats or to get to directly compete with them head on. I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to compete with him against him last year at NCAAs, and I didn't want it to be a situation where, if I come out on top, people were making excuses saying it was unexpected or it was an upset or this and that. I wanted him to be aware of who I am, and I wanted to get his best shot. I didn't want that in the back of my mind, like, oh, man, did he just not know who I was or whatever it may be. I wanted him to be fully aware of who I am and to throw everything he had at me so I could see what gains and what areas I needed to address moving forward. And I think it pushed me to be a better wrestler. So that's kind of what that was all about. But, it just kind of circles back to, like I said, the point of just trying to be the best possible person, whether it be a brother, a boyfriend, a son, a student, a professional athlete. I'm always trying to be the best possible person. And I thought at the time, going up to heavyweight was a decision that I did to chase that and to try to become the best possible wrestler I can be. And as you put it, kind of poking the bear to try to push myself to be the best possible wrestler by adding a little bit more pressure. So, I guess that's kind of what that was all about.
What did you learn from that semifinal match and having the opportunity to get your hands on Kyle?
Mid-match adjustments. It takes mid-match adjustments to be an elite level wrestler. If you look at our opening exchanges and then you see how his stance shifted, and a couple other small adjustments he made throughout the match, he did a really good job of recognizing things and making mid-match adjustments. He had a very malleable or, dynamic game plan. He was able to make a lot of changes on the go, which was something I had never really experienced before. And then, also it just kind of reaffirmed that I felt that I can hang with anybody. I know that the score seems kind of lopsided, but you take 1 or 2 of those exchanges out, and I believe I'm right there with him. And it just kind of reinforced the mindset that I can hang with anybody in the world, seeing as he's the pound-for-pound number 1 right now.
One of the things that's really unique to me, one of the things that's really interesting to me about Duke Wrestling, and I've never seen this or heard of this anywhere else but one family having 2 sets of twins. You got 4 fine silvers in your lineup. How hard is it to keep the fine silvers straight?
Yeah, we love some fine silvers down in Durham, that's for sure. It's not too hard to keep them straight, to be honest. They all have very unique and individual personalities and even traits to them because they're fraternal twins rather than identical twins. I think it's kind of unfortunate, and I would encourage the wrestling community to kind of try to get to know them all on an individual basis. I feel that, unfortunately, no matter what they kind of accomplish in their careers, they're always going to get to group together as, the 2 sets of twins, the 4 brothers. But that's kind of doing a disservice to them because they really are just such great individual people and come from such a great family. I think it would benefit the wrestling community to get to know each and every one of them for sure.
What's it like being coached by Glenn Lanham? What are his unique characteristics?
Coach Lanham is a man of his word. He's a man of true character. He's a little bit old school. He's the kind of guy that you would see in a Western film back in the day because he tells you how it is, and he's not going to sugarcoat it, regardless of the situation. I've got some stories, that could definitely make people laugh. One, for example, is I remember the first time I qualified for the NCAA tournament. I was obviously pretty thrilled. A lot of people didn't think I would get to compete at the Division I level, and that was an achievement I felt. I walked off the mat, and he grabbed me, and he said, I'm glad that you're happy for making to the NCAA tournament, but I don't want to ever see you compete like that again. And, he just always keeps you in check. He stays true to what he says. He doesn't care about necessarily the results in the match. He cares about the effort that you put forward. And if you go out and compete to the best of your ability, then he's going to have your back, and he's going to be in your corner for life. And he's always stayed true to what he said and providing every opportunity he possibly can for me. And I honestly feel blessed to have Coach Lamb in my life. He's the type of man that I hope my sons one day grow up to be like, and I hope later in life someone will say that I'm like that. He's a true man, stays to his word, and he's just a man of great character through and through.
Well, great stuff, Jacob. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Best of luck to you the rest of the way, and thanks for giving us some time.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for having me on, and anytime. I love the sport, and I love growing it any way that I possibly can help.
You've been listening to On the Mat, the Cedar Valley's longest-running radio show devoted entirely to wrestling. Brought to you by Rolling Ford and the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum on 1650 The Fan.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.